My nephew knocked my son unconscious at a family barbecue. I knocked his father down right next to him. My brother Dwight had been raising his son Keller without consequences since the day he was born. Keller was 16 years old and built like a refrigerator. He had been wrestling competitively since he was 7 and had won state championships 3 years in a row. Everyone in the family knew Keller was talented. Everyone also knew Keller was mean. He used his size and strength to intimidate anyone smaller than him. At family gatherings, he would corner younger cousins and pin them down until they cried. He would take food off other kids' plates because he knew nobody would stop him. He would make comments about other kids being weak and pathetic while his parents smiled proudly at their strong, athletic son. My son Eli was 12 and small for his age. He loved reading and building model airplanes and had never been in a fight in his life. He was quiet and gentle and avoided Keller whenever possible. Keller noticed this and decided it made Eli a perfect target. The bullying had been going on for about 2 years. Every time we visited Dwight's house or met at my parents' place, Keller would find ways to torment Eli. He would shove him into walls when no adults were looking. He would trip him and laugh when he fell. He would whisper threats about what he would do if Eli ever told anyone. Eli begged me not to say anything because he was afraid it would make things worse. I talked to Dwight about it once. I told him Keller was being rough with Eli and it needed to stop. Dwight waved his hand and said boys would be boys. He said Keller was just playing around. He said Eli needed to toughen up and stop being so sensitive. He said maybe if Eli did some sports instead of reading all day, he wouldn't be such an easy target. His wife Corinne nodded along and said Keller didn't mean any harm. She said he was just being competitive. She said I was overreacting to normal kid behavior. I stopped bringing it up because clearly they didn't care. I just tried to keep Eli away from Keller as much as possible. Then came the summer barbecue at my parents' house. The whole family was there, including aunts and uncles and cousins we only saw once a year. Dwight showed up bragging about Keller's latest wrestling tournament. He said college scouts were already watching. He said full scholarships were basically guaranteed. He said Keller was going to be the first Division I athlete in the family. He was insufferable, but I ignored him because I had learned long ago that engaging with Dwight only made things worse. I kept my eye on Eli and made sure he stayed near the adults. For the first hour, everything was fine. Then I went inside to use the bathroom. I was gone for maybe 3 minutes. When I came back outside, I heard screaming from the side of the house. I ran toward the sound and found Eli on the ground unconscious. His nose was bleeding and his eyes were closed and he wasn't moving. Keller was standing over him, shaking out his fist like he had just thrown a punch. Several younger kids were crying and pointing at Keller. One of them was yelling that Keller hit Eli in the face for no reason. I dropped to my knees next to my son. His face was pale and his breathing was shallow. I called his name, but he didn't respond. Someone behind me was calling for an ambulance. I held Eli's head and tried to wake him up, but he was completely out. My boy. My gentle, quiet boy who never hurt anyone. Lying on the ground because a 16-year-old monster decided to use him as a punching bag. Dwight came jogging over asking what happened. Keller immediately started talking. He said Eli started it. He said Eli called him a name. He said he was just defending himself. He said Eli swung first and he had no choice. I looked at the crying children standing nearby. I asked them what really happened. One of them said Eli didn't do anything. She said Keller walked up and demanded Eli's soda. She said when Eli said no, Keller punched him in the face as hard as he could. She said Eli didn't even see it coming. Dwight shook his head. He said kids exaggerate. He said there had to be more to the story. He said Keller would never hit someone unprovoked. He said Eli probably did something to deserve it. He said that word, deserve. My son was lying unconscious on the ground with blood running down his face, and my brother said he probably deserved it. Something inside me snapped. I stood up slowly. Dwight was still talking. He was saying Keller was a good kid who sometimes got carried away. He was saying boys needed to work things out physically sometimes. He was saying I was too soft on Eli and this was bound to happen eventually. He was saying maybe this would teach Eli to stand up for himself. I hit him mid-sentence. My fist connected with his jaw and his head snapped sideways. He stumbled back and fell on the grass right next to where Eli was still lying unconscious. Dwight looked up at me with shock on his face. He asked what was wrong with me. He said I was crazy. He said he was going to press charges. He tried to get up and I pushed him back down. I told him to stay down. I told him his son had been bullying mine for 2 years and he did nothing. I told him I came to him like an adult and asked him to handle it and he laughed it off. I told him his son just knocked out a 12-year-old over a can of soda and his first instinct was to blame the victim. I told him he failed as a father and I was done watching it happen. The ambulance arrived a few minutes later. The paramedics moved fast. One of them knelt beside Eli while the other fitted a brace around his neck and started firing questions at me in a calm voice that somehow made everything feel more terrifying. How long had he been out? Did he hit the ground hard? Was he breathing normally? Did he vomit? I answered everything I could while trying not to look at the blood on his mouth. My mother was crying. My father kept telling everyone to step back. Corinne was checking Keller's hand to make sure he had not broken it on my son's face. That was the moment I understood this was never going to be fixed with apologies and family talks. These people were already choosing the attacker over the child on the ground. When the paramedics said they were taking Eli in for imaging and observation, I told him I was going. My wife Nora was out of town at her sister's baby shower 2 counties over. I called her while they were loading Eli into the ambulance, but she did not answer. I left a message that barely sounded human. Then I climbed in after my son. On the ride to the hospital, Eli opened his eyes once and whispered, "Dad?" I told him I was there. He said his head hurt and then closed his eyes again. I sat beside him listening to the the monitor beep and trying not to imagine all the ways that punch could have ended worse. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Dwight. I rejected the call. Then he texted me. He said I had assaulted him in front of everyone and better hope Eli was okay because now I was the one in trouble. I stared at the screen and felt something cold settle inside me. My son was strapped to a stretcher, and my brother was already worried about controlling the story. At the hospital, they moved Eli through triage fast. Head injuries make everybody move faster. They ran a CT scan, checked his vision, asked him his name and the date and what happened. He remembered being outside with the younger kids. He remembered Keller wanting the soda, then nothing. Nora came running in 40 minutes later, face white, eyes red, hair half falling out of the clip she had thrown it into for the drive. The second she saw Eli in the bed with gauze under his nose, she folded into me and started crying so hard she could barely breathe. The doctor came in just before sunset. Eli had a concussion, a broken nose, and a small fracture near the orbital bone. No brain bleed, no surgery. Monitoring, rest, darkness, and follow-up appointments. He said we were lucky. I nodded because I did not trust myself to speak. Lucky. That word sat in my chest like gravel. Lucky that Keller had not hit him harder. Lucky that Eli had not cracked his skull on the stone edging by the flower beds. Lucky that my son was waking up confused instead of never waking up at all. The police came that night. They took my statement first. I told them everything, including the punch I threw at Dwight. I told them about the 2 years before the barbecue too. The threats, the shoving, the one conversation where I tried to make Dwight handle it like a father, and he told me Eli needed to toughen up. I told them exactly what the witness children had said. No shove, no fight, no warning. Keller demanded the soda, and when Eli said no, Keller hit him. When the officer asked if we wanted to press charges against Keller, Nora answered before I did. Yes. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. I said yes too. Eli came home the next afternoon with instructions for rest and minimal screen time. The reading restriction hurt him almost as much as the bruising. Books were his refuge. Model kits and planes and thick history books were where he disappeared when life got too loud. Now even that had to wait because his headaches got worse when he focused too long. That first night home, he asked me if he should have just given Keller the soda. I turned so fast the chair scraped against the floor. No, I said. Absolutely not. Someone demanding your things and hurting you when you say no is not your fault. He looked down at the blanket. Then he said something that hit harder than any punch I threw that day. He said he had not told me everything before because I still made him go around them. I felt like the room tilted. Over the next 20 minutes, he finally told Nora and me the full truth. Keller had done far more than shove him into walls and trip him. He had pinned Eli behind the garage at Thanksgiving, twisted his wrist until he cried, snatched pieces from his model airplanes and laughed while Eli looked for them. Once he squeezed the back of Eli's neck so hard it left bruises. He told Eli nobody would believe him if he talked because people like Keller always got believed over people like him. That sentence wrecked me, not because it was dramatic, because it was rational. Keller had learned exactly what kind of family he was living in. One where charm plus size plus trophies beat truth. The next morning, my mother called. She asked how Eli was in the same breathless voice people use before pivoting to their real point. Within a minute, she was talking about how complicated everything had become because of the police report. My father called after that to say he wished I had shown more restraint and that both boys had made mistakes. Both boys. I hung up on him. Corinne posted something vague online about people weaponizing isolated incidents to ruin promising children. A cousin sent me a screenshot. Nora commented one sentence. Your son sent ours to the hospital. Corinne deleted the post 10 minutes later, but the line had been drawn. Then the witness statements started coming in. Every younger cousin who saw the punch told the same story. Keller demanded the soda. Eli said no. Keller hit him. No one backed Keller's self-defense version. Not one person. That was bad enough for Dwight. Then things got worse. The school started asking questions because one of the witness kids had an older brother on the wrestling team. Suddenly, 2 boys from Keller's team admitted he had roughed them up before practice and threatened them into silence. Another boy said he had shoved him into a locker at a tournament because he thought he was staring too long. Once adults outside the family started looking, they found exactly what I expected they would find. This was not a one-time loss of temper. This was a pattern. Dwight called me screaming that I had ruined his son's future. I told him no, he had ruined it himself, one excuse at a time. He said Keller had made one mistake. I told him one mistake does not usually come with witnesses, prior victims, and a concussion. Therapy started the next week. Eli did not want to go. He said therapy was for people who could not handle their problems. That sentence sounded so much like something Keller would say that Nora had to take over before I lost my mind. She told Eli therapy was just a place where he did not have to be brave for anyone for 1 hour.
Yo, pause. Eli saying therapy is for people who can't handle problems? Bro, he's literally 12.
That got him through the door. His therapist, Dr. Levin, was the kind of man who spoke gently without sounding fake. After Eli's 3rd session, he sat down with Nora and me and said the most important thing right now was consistency, safety, no forced family contact, no talk about forgiveness, no minimizing. He said shame had been growing in Eli for a long time and kids often mistake being targeted for being weak. I told him there would be no contact. 2 Sundays later, my parents invited everyone over to talk things out as a family. I should have said no. Nora wanted me to say no, but some stubborn, damaged part of me still wanted to see if evidence could shame people into decency. It could not. The second I walked into my parents' living room, I knew what it was. An intervention, but not for the violent kid. For me, my parents on the couch, Dwight and Corinne beside each other. 2 aunts, an uncle, and a few cousins arranged in chairs like they were waiting for a confession. My mother started with how strained the family had become. My father followed with a speech about emotions getting out of hand. Then my mother said Dwight was willing to let my assault on him go if I agreed to stop cooperating with the complaint against Keller. I laughed. I could not help it. The whole thing was too warped to treat seriously. No one is saying Keller was right, one of my aunts said, but ruining a boy's future over one violent incident seems extreme. I looked at her. Did anyone tell you about the 2 years before the barbecue? I asked. Did anyone tell you other boys from his team came forward? Or did Dwight leave those parts out because they spoil the tragic athlete story? Silence. Corinne said I had no proof of that. I told her we had Eli's statement, witness statements, school complaints, and a therapist documenting trauma. Dwight muttered that I was turning my son into a victim for attention. I stood up so fast my chair scraped. My son is a victim, I said. He was bullied for 2 years, punched unconscious, and blamed for it while adults stood around worrying about your son's scholarship chances. My mother started crying. My father told me not to talk to her that way. That did it. No, I said. You all listen to me. If any of you choose Dwight and Keller after this, then you are choosing people who hurt children and lie about it. And if that is your choice, you do not get access to my family. Not me, not Nora, not Eli. My mother looked stunned. You would keep our grandson from us? I would keep him from anyone who thinks his pain is negotiable, I said. Then I walked out. 3 people followed me into the driveway. Not my parents, not Dwight. My cousin Rachel, my uncle Ben, and my aunt Sarah. Rachel was crying. She said her boys had complained about Keller being rough with them too, and she had brushed it off because Dwight always called it competitiveness. Uncle Ben said my father hated conflict so much he would rather sit inside it forever than confront it. Aunt Sarah hugged me and whispered that she was sorry all of them had let it get that far. That driveway was where the family split for real. After that, more people started talking, quietly at first. A cousin mentioned Keller stole lunch money from a younger boy at a tournament. Someone else said he liked cornering smaller kids at holiday gatherings and making them say things for his amusement. Once the perfect athlete image cracked, the ugliness underneath it became impossible to unsee. Then the school suspended Keller from competition pending the conduct review. That was when Dwight really lost control. He showed up at my house on a Wednesday evening pounding on the front door so hard the picture frames rattled. Eli froze on the couch. I told him to go upstairs and stay there while I stepped outside. Dwight's face was red with fury. Fix this, he said. No. He lost his captain spot. Good. Scouts are backing off. That is not my problem. He stepped closer and said I had always hated that his kid was better than mine. Better at what? I asked. Hurting smaller people? Then he made the mistake of saying Eli acted helpless. I stepped so close we were almost chest to chest. Say one more thing about my son, I said. For the first time in my life, I think Dwight realized I was not participating in our old roles anymore. I was not the younger brother trying to keep the peace. I was not the one smoothing things over so mom would calm down. I was done. He changed tactics and started talking about our parents. Mom crying every day, dad not sleeping, the family being torn apart. No, I said. What tore the family apart was your son punching a child. Then I went inside and locked the door. Keller's juvenile case ended with probation, counseling, anger management, and community service. Because he was still a minor and because this was his first formal offense, the court gave him a chance to salvage what could still be salvaged. Dwight called that outcome unfair. I called it mercy. The school removed him from leadership and sat him for the season. Meanwhile, Eli healed in uneven steps. The bruises faded before the fear did. He startled at loud noises. He hated being outside alone. Some nights he woke up disoriented and angry because his dreams always ended with a shape rushing at his face. But little by little, things improved. Fewer headaches, better sleep. Longer stretches where Keller did not come up at all. Then one afternoon he surprised us. He asked if he could take a self-defense class. Not wrestling, he said quickly when I looked at him. Something that teaches you how to get away from bigger people. So we found a small jiu-jitsu gym run by a patient instructor who talked more about control than aggression. Eli was bad at it at first and hated feeling clumsy. Then one night, about 6 weeks in, he got into the car and said quietly, I learned how to get out from under somebody bigger today. I kept my eyes on the road because I knew if I looked at him right then, I would cry. By Thanksgiving, we were fully out of the family orbit. My mother sent a message saying the door was always open when I was ready to stop punishing everyone. I read it twice, set my phone down, and never answered. We had Thanksgiving at home instead. Small, quiet, safe. Nora cooked too much food. Eli made a paper runway for one of his planes and set it in the middle of the table like a joke. Nobody got cornered, nobody got threatened, nobody got hit. It was the calmest holiday I had ever had. Christmas was better. By then, Eli was sleeping through most nights again. He unwrapped a thick aviation encyclopedia and smiled so hard his whole face changed. At one point, he looked around the living room and said, "This is better than Grandma's house." He said it plainly, like a fact he had finally stopped feeling guilty about. A year after the barbecue, I ran into Dwight and Corinne at a grocery store across town. They looked older, not dramatically, just worn down in the way people look when life stops cooperating with the story they tell about themselves. Keller was not with them. Dwight saw me first. For a second, I thought he might ignore me. Instead, he said, "Still think you did the right thing?" I had frozen waffles in my cart and dish soap and cereal. My son was at home doing homework and planning which model he wanted to build next. Normal life, safe life, hard-won life. I looked at Dwight and said, "Every day." Then I turned down another aisle and kept walking. There was one last thing I did that made the line permanent. In January, after months of voicemails and guilt texts through relatives, I changed the locks, installed cameras, and mailed a short certified letter to my parents, Dwight and Corinne. It said the same thing to all 4 of them. Do not come to my house uninvited. Do not contact Eli directly. Do not send gifts, letters, or apologies through other family members. Any future contact goes through email only and only if it concerns a real emergency. Nora read the letter before I sent it and said, "Send it exactly like that." So I did. My mother responded with a 3-page message about broken hearts and misunderstandings and how one terrible afternoon had erased a lifetime of family love. I almost answered. Then I thought about Eli saying he had not told me everything because I still made him go around them. I deleted the draft and blocked her email too. That was the part I had never understood when I was younger. Boundaries are not dramatic because they are loud. They are dramatic because they are clear. People who benefit from confusion always act like clarity is cruelty. Nora understood that before I did. One night while we were cleaning up after dinner, she handed me a dish towel and said, "You know know what finally changed? I asked what. She said, you stopped hoping they would suddenly become the kind of people they have never been. You started protecting Eli from the people they actually are. She was right. I had spent years negotiating with a fantasy version of my family. The reasonable version. The loving version. The version that would hear the truth and correct itself. But the real version was the one that watched a bleeding child on the grass and still looked for excuses. Once I accepted that, everything got simpler. Not easier. Simpler. Eli did not need me to preserve a broken family image. He needed me to believe him faster than they denied him. He needed one adult in his corner who did not care how awkward holidays became or how many relatives got offended or whether my mother cried to her church friends about being cut off from her grandson. He needed safety more than he needed tradition. So that is what he got. Eli is 13 now. Taller, stronger, still gentle, still the kind of kid who apologizes when he bumps into furniture. He has a faint bump on his nose from the break. I used to hate seeing it. Now I think of it as a scar he earned by surviving people who wanted him small and scared. A few months ago, he asked me if I regretted hitting Dwight. I told him the truth. I regret that it took your ambulance ride to make me stop pretending those people would ever protect you. He thought about that. Then he gave me the first dark little smile I had seen from him in a long time and said, yeah, but you hit him pretty good. I laughed. He laughed too. And for the first time, the memory did not feel like an open wound, just a scar. Family is not who demands your silence while your child bleeds. Family is not who calls cruelty a misunderstanding because the cruel kid has trophies on the wall. Family is who protects the smallest person in the yard. And if they will not do that, then you become the wall yourself. So that is what I became. And if I had to burn every family barbecue to the ground to give my son that safety, then fine, let it burn.
That's a real dad right there. Cut off his own parents, changed the locks, all of it, for his kid. That's what it's supposed to look like. All right, that's the story. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.